As tensions between Israel and the Iranian regime reach a boiling point, one extraordinarily brave Iranian, former Muslim, pro Israel follower of Jesus refuses to be silent about the gospel and also about Zionism. She joins us now from the UK. So, growing up as an Iranian Muslim, what were your views of Israel and also Christianity?
Right. So we were never radical Muslims. Just to clarify, we were cultural Muslims. I've never ever heard any anti-Israeli opinion or propaganda or that, Israel or Jews or Zionists did this or that, except in schools, but we all know those were lies. So they would drag us every now and then in schools to go protest, to go shout death to America, death to Israel. That was just a given. It's part of the, I don't think we ever even questioned it. It's just, if you're in school, they unannounced, they just drag you. The whole school has to go to the streets now. If you were in the front and shouting louder or were willing to burn Israeli or American flags, you would get points in school. You might have get some financial incentive, and if you during the chants would refuse to chant it, then you might get fines. Many majority, I'd say 80 to 90% of families would tell their children not to chant any of that. And they would just pay the fine or try to get away with it. So it was never, that was it. And they would never announce what day that was because they knew no one would go to work and no one would go to school on those days.
Wow. That's fascinating. I think it's really interesting hearing your perspective, even before we got started, that, there's the Iranian regime in Tehran that's, crazy fanatical, but a lot of Iranian people are actually kind of pro-Israel.
We don't see Israeli people as non-Middle Eastern or non-Asian or like a different species, or if they were aliens and don't belong there. Like, we know that Jews, Hebrew children, Yehudis, they've been there for thousands of years. I don't think anyone questions that like they do in the West. That's just a commonly known thing. Imagine if Europe would suddenly question the existence of French people.
So how did your encounter with Jesus change your view of Israel?
I think it didn't change my view on Israel. I just had no idea that Christianity had anything to do with Judaism. We thought there is, Muslims, and that's our religion in Central Asia and Middle East, and it's as if it's always been like this. And we thought Christianity is the religion of the white people in the West, and then Jews have their own thing. But I had no idea Jesus was Jewish. I had no idea Christianity was birthed amongst the Jews in Israel. I had no idea it was the Jews that spread the gospel. Those were completely shocking to me. And I remember when I was reading the Bible, one of the things that was foreign to me was the whole concept of Western church. It just culturally wasn't our culture, not the mosque was anyway either, but still, I think when I found out that, I don't know, at some point I was reading the New Testament and I was just like, wait a minute, Jesus was Jewish. And I just jumped off my chair. I told my brother, and I mean, I wasn't consciously thinking this, but those were the first words that came out of my mouth, was like, he's not one of them, he's one of us. And I felt like the level of me being able to connect to his teaching and to what he was saying was like deepened, like just overnight a lot, because I could suddenly understand. I was like, yeah, he was in Middle East. That's where he was speaking these words. He wasn't in Germany saying these things.
So walk me through, you're we were talking before we got started about how you, an Iranian young lady who grew up in Iran, now, kind of speaks for Israel, stands up for the Jewish state. What has your experience like been in some of the churches in the UK?
It's been mixed. I guess I never, because we know and we understand the history of where Palestinians, well, Arabs now rebranded Palestinians. I didn't know. It came to me as a shock that the history of Jewish people in Israel, that we would dispute whether Jerusalem is Jewish or not in this day and age, whether that would be, topic of conversation, whether Jerusalem belongs to the Jews or not. Not just in the West, where they are educated or they should know, but especially in the church when they're reading a Jewish Bible and worshiping a Jewish Messiah, and they know, I mean, they can read the Bible. They know it's 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years worth of history, and they know it's all based in Israel, and they know that they are the Jewish people. I mean, the very basics. I just didn't know that we're at a stage where we're disputing this. I also didn't know that, with 120 armed conflicts currently in the world, with 3 active genocides now, actual genocides, in Sudan, in Syria, absolute famine and destruction in Yemen, like we're talking millions dead. I didn't know that we would just ignore that completely, or just ignore 119 active armed conflicts, many of which are way more serious than what's happening in Gaza, as devastating as that is, that those would be all ignored. I guess what I'm trying to say, I didn't understand that there would be such an Israeli obsession in a negative
Mm,
way here, because we actually don't have this in Middle East. You have
wow.
very small, very dense, very specifically radicalized communities. This is not, a general opinion.
These are absolutely fascinating insights. Um, okay, so let me ask you this one last question.
Mm.
What would you say to someone that has um, bitterness in their heart, hatred in their heart towards Israel, the Jewish people, even Christianity, the gospel? What would your encouragement be?
I guess to understand why, not to say Christianity is perfect, not to say Israel is perfect as a nation, or any of that stuff. And I'm sure there will be people who've been hurt by either groups, or maybe never even met any members of either groups. I guess it's like racism. Like, you really do have to examine your own heart. There would be stuff in there that prejudice, or just sensitivity, or just proclivities towards, resisting a certain ideology, is like, if you don't know enough about it, what, you might want to question your heart as to, well, why would I, be so resistant or anti this if I don't fully understand it? Although, and that's something I have noticed, that many people have said that it's just like, well, my heart just doesn't, or my heart just feels Israel is doing wrong. My heart is, bleeding for the Palestinians, or, and I'm like, but what do you know about it? Like, what do you actually know is happening there? Well, I don't. It's just my heart. And I think that's where I'd be a little bit careful as to, like, we not just, everyone needs to sober up a little bit and use common sense and critical thinking, maybe a bit more.
Okay, so one final question. I know folks that are watching this want to know: how did you, growing up, initially in Iran, former cultural Muslim, come to know Yeshua?
Well, actually, I was very anti-Christianity, and that's why I said what I said earlier, to just be a little bit more, critical as to why do I hate this so much without having any negative experience with it. I actually was, after one night in uni, in a bar, I converted a girl out of Christianity into atheism, and because she was. Um, and then on my way home, I just felt really empty. They always say there's a, you know, a God-shaped hole in your chest and blah blah. As cheesy as it sounds, but I physically saw the hole in my chest. It wasn't even a bad feeling. It wasn't a good feeling. It was empty, and I'd never felt that empty. So I started shouting at, I think, 3 a.m. in the middle of a highway. I stopped the car and I just started shouting at God, saying, "If you're real, then why do you hide yourself? And if you're not real, then it doesn't make sense from an evolutionary perspective for me to have this hole in my chest. I shouldn't be empty." So I went home, and 2 weeks later, somebody gave me a New Testament randomly, which, it wasn't cool to accept it. So, but I had to humble myself and be like, well, I did ask, if he's real, I'll follow him, whoever he is, because I didn't know. I was like, I don't know if you're Buddha, I don't know if you're Allah, I don't know if you're Jesus, I don't know who you are. So I remember it was, I felt I had a strong conviction to voice, I want the living God. And I kept saying, I want the living God. I don't want any other one speaking to me, because I'm not interested in organized religion at all. But if there is a living God, not a dead one, a living one, then I'm open. And then, yeah, then I read, and then the whole New Testament was just jumping. Words were jumping at me. I remember in the evenings I would read it, and sometimes I'd have to throw the book away, I was like, it's jumping at me. Like, it's like words are coming at me. I don't know how to explain it. Then one night, I was just lying down. I felt somebody tickle my toe. I don't know how else to explain it. It was just like a, well, okay, let's not get into specifics. But I felt a presence in my room and I felt like I need to kneel, which was very interesting to me because I always said I will never worship a God that requires me to kneel before him. I was quite rebellious in that sense. But I was kneeling and I felt a voice say, get up. And I was like, no, I don't want to get up. And he's like, but I'm not requiring you to kneel, get up. And then another thing that I felt, which I'd never heard before, is like I literally felt fire was just coming, pouring on me. So I thought I'd burn initially, but it felt really relaxing. And then I felt I saw a vision of Jesus, and but I knew he was God. But I also knew he was Jesus. So I remember I told him, I said, this is blasphemy. In Islam, you can't be God. And he didn't say anything. He just stood there until I was convinced. And then he went away, and I fell asleep at 5 a.m. in the morning. I knew people said Jesus was the son of God, or even in Islam, he's like a holier, more holy than all the other prophets. There's absolutely no dispute about that. The virgin birth, all of these things are not disputed in Islam at all. It's just his divinity is. Actually, in Islam, it even says in the Quran, I've heard, I haven't read it actually, was that he's the only one that had the spirit of God, or Allah. So I didn't know anyone knew this. So I went to tell some people, and I said, Jesus was God, and they were like, yep, he was. So I thought they had the same vision as me last night, and I was just like, he came to you too. He told you. They were like, who came to us? And I was like, wait, how do you know he's God? They were like, it's just commonly believed that he is. I was just like, well, no one told me. Never heard of anything. I'd never even didn't even cross my mind that, I was fully convinced that he was just a man, but a holy man, a prophet. I had no idea he was the real thing.
Wow. Wow. What an incredible testimony. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your opinions on everything we've talked about. We're definitely keeping your identity a little secure. Just to, you do have family that we want to make sure are safe. And so I am so, and I know the people watching this are so blessed to hear your testimony. Wow. That is just amazing. Yeshua showing up like that. Emmanuel. So thank you again, my friend, and we'll have to have you back on. But for now, God bless.
Thank you. You too.